At 91, Willie Nelson, the outlaw poet of country music, sits quietly on his Texas porch, guitar in hand, watching the sun dip below the hills. For decades, his voice carried across America, from smoke-filled bars to sold-out arenas. But recently, fans noticed something different. Fewer shows, longer pauses, a tone of finality in his words. And now, for the first time, Willie himself admits what many have quietly feared. He's ready to let go, not of life, but of the road. After more than 7 decades of relentless touring, sleepless nights, and endless highways, the man who became the heart of American music is ready to step away from the stage. But his reason isn't sadness nor decline. It's something far deeper. In his own words, Willie says, "There comes a time when you stop chasing applause and start listening to silence." What did he mean by that? What could drive a man who lives for performing to finally say goodbye to the road that built his legend? Tonight, we uncover the truth, the real reason Willie Nelson wants it to end, and how his decision reveals the most human chapter of his extraordinary life. For Willie Nelson, the stage was never just a place to sing. It was home. Long before the fame, before the outlaw image and the braided hair, there was simply a man with a guitar trying to survive. Born in Abbott, Texas in 1933, Willie's life began with hardship. His mother left early, his father soon after. Raised by his grandparents, he learned early what loneliness sounded like. But music became his way out, a language he could speak even when words failed him. By the time most men his age were slowing down, Willie was still running full speed. For years, he performed 150 to 200 shows annually, living out of buses and motel rooms, sleeping under the stars between gigs. The road became his religion, his audience, his congregation. But even legends get tired. As the years rolled on, the travel began to take its toll. Friends and bandmates passed away. Cities started to blur together. The long nights on the bus became quieter, the applause a little less thrilling. Willie once joked, "I've been on the road so long I don't know what staying home feels like." But behind the humor was truth. For decades, he had sacrificed everything, rest, family time, and health, for the sake of the music he loved. And then came a moment that changed everything. During a concert in 2019, midway through his performance, Willie's voice faltered. He stopped singing, looked down, and quietly walked off stage. Fans were stunned. Later, he revealed it was due to breathing issues, a warning sign that even the strongest spirits are still bound by time. Since then, his schedule has slowly thinned. But rather than fear it, Willie embraced the change. He began spending more time at his ranch, surrounded by family, animals, and old friends. He often speaks of watching the sunset and feeling at peace. In a recent interview, when asked why he's ready to slow down, Willie smiled and said softly, "You can't be on the road forever. At some point, you gotta go home." To many, it sounded like the words of a tired man. But for Willie, it was something else entirely. Not an ending, but a return. For the first time in his life, he's learning how to live without the roar of the crowd, without the miles stretching endlessly before him. And in that quiet, he's beginning to understand something most people never do. That sometimes, the greatest journeys end not with applause, but with peace. For most of his life, Willie Nelson treated time like it was an old friend he could outrun. He never slowed down, never looked back. But as the years crept forward, even the red-headed stranger began to feel the pull of age. Not in spirit, but in body. The years of touring had taken their toll. Endless travel, late nights, and decades of cigarette smoke left their mark. In 2019, Willie was forced to cancel several shows due to breathing problems. It was a humbling moment for a man who'd always seemed invincible. "I thought I could just keep going," he later said. But sometimes, your body tells you what your heart won't. Behind the curtain, the struggle was real. His closest friends noticed it first, the way he'd quietly rest between songs, the deep breaths before every verse. Yet despite it all, he never let the crowd see weakness. Each performance was a love letter to the life that built him. His longtime harmonica player, Mickey Raphael, once said, "Willie never complains. He'll play through anything. But I think he knows that every show now might be his last." Still, Nelson never wanted pity, only truth. He often spoke about mortality with humor and grace, saying, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not living while I'm here." And live, he did. Even as his body began to slow, Willie's spirit refused to yield. He spent mornings riding horses, afternoons writing songs, and evenings strumming his guitar beneath the stars. Music wasn't just his career, it was his medicine. But something began to shift in the quiet of those Texas nights. The applause that once echoed in his ears was replaced by the sound of wind rustling through cedar trees. For the first time, Willie started to appreciate silence, not as absence, but as peace. Friends say that during one of those nights, he turned to his wife Annie and said softly, "I think I've said what I needed to say." That sentence lingered, not in sadness, but in acceptance. After all, how do you say goodbye to something that defined your entire life? How do you step off a road that's carried you for nearly a century? The answer came slowly, through reflection. He began revisiting old recordings, unreleased songs, and letters he had written to friends long gone. Each word, each note, was a reminder that his legacy was already written, not in gold records or sold-out shows, but in the way his music made people feel. When asked recently if he fears the end, Willie simply smiled and said, "The end of what? The road? The show? That's just part of the journey. You don't stop living, you just change where you play." It's a line only Willie could say. Wise, gentle, and full of that unmistakable humor that's carried him through every storm. For fans, it's bittersweet. The idea of a world without Willie Nelson on the road feels impossible. But for the man himself, it's not an ending. It's a chance to rest. To finally listen to the quiet song that life has been humming beneath all the noise. And as the sun sets on another Texas evening, Willie's guitar leans softly against the porch rail, strings catching the light. He's not finished, just finally at peace with slowing down. When Willie Nelson hinted that he was ready to slow down, fans feared the worst, that the road had finally ended. But instead of retreating into silence, Willie did something entirely his own. He packed his guitar, climbed back onto his tour bus, and decided to say goodbye his way. It wasn't an official farewell tour, no grand marketing campaign, no fancy banners. Just a few words to his crew. Let's play a little longer. From dusty outdoor stages in Texas to intimate venues across the South, Willie's final shows became something magical. There was a calmness in his presence, a deeper gratitude in every lyric. The man who once sang of heartbreak and whiskey now sang of peace and acceptance. Fans said you could feel it, that every word came from somewhere beyond fame. At each stop, he spoke less, but every word mattered. Before performing On the Road again, he'd smile and say, "This song's carried me a long way. Guess it's time I let it rest." The audience would fall silent, many in tears, realizing they were witnessing history. His son Lucas often joined him on stage, their voices blending in harmony, father and son, torchbearer and legend. It was a powerful image, the man who'd built a lifetime of music now passing it gently to the next generation. Behind the scenes, there was a quiet reflection in the air. Crew members said Willie would often stare out the bus window, watching the world roll by. "He doesn't say much these days," one friend noted, "but you can tell he's thinking, really thinking, about it all." In interviews, Willie remained his usual mix of wisdom and wit. When asked why he keeps performing despite his age, he laughed, "Because the guitar still likes me." But then he added softly, "Every song could be my last. That's why I sing it like it is." These shows weren't just concerts. They were confessions, celebrations, and farewells rolled into one. Fans didn't come to watch a man perform. They came to thank him. A woman in Nashville described it best. "You could feel love in that room like it was alive." Everyone knew we might never see him up there again, and no one wanted the song to end. After each show, Willie would linger on stage a little longer, tipping his hat, waving to the crowd, his eyes glistening in the light. It wasn't sadness that filled them, but gratitude. He often said that applause felt like a prayer, and in those final tours, it was as if both artist and audience were saying their goodbyes through music. Back on his ranch, Willie spends his mornings writing songs that may never be released. He's not chasing hits anymore. He's chasing honesty. One friend said he's been recording simple acoustic tracks, just voice and guitar, like he's talking to God instead of a microphone. And maybe that's what this chapter of his life is about. Conversation, closure, and connection. The same man who once lived to be on the road again now understands that the journey was never about the destination. It was about the people he met, the stories he told, and the music that outlived them all. As one of his crew put it, Willie's not leaving music. He's just taking the long way home. It's a warm Texas morning. The air hums with the sound of cicadas, and Willie Nelson sits on the porch of his ranch, Trigger, his weathered guitar, resting beside him. He gazes out at the horizon, a faint smile hidden beneath the brim of his hat. This is where his story began. And this is where he wants it to end. After more than 70 years on the road, Willie's finally ready to explain why. It's not about quitting, he says softly. It's about knowing when the song's over. For Willie, life has always been music, unpredictable, messy, and beautiful. But now he speaks of peace with the same reverence he once gave to melody. The endless highways, the bright lights, the cheering crowds, they gave him everything. But they also took something from him. Time. He missed birthdays, goodbyes, and quiet mornings with the people he loved. Now, in his 9th decade, he's reclaiming that time. Not to escape, but to live differently. He explains, "When you're young, you think the road will last forever. But one day you realize the road's been waiting for you to stop and rest. For the first time." Willie Nelson has learned to rest. He spends his days writing letters to old friends, tending to his horses, and watching the sunset with Annie. His studio is still active, but the rush is gone. Every note he plays now feels like a conversation, gentle, personal, eternal. His health has slowed him down, yes, but not his heart. Friends say he's content in a way they've never seen before. Willie doesn't see this as an ending, one of his bandmates says. He sees it as going home. And maybe that's what this entire journey has been leading to. Home. Not the kind built of wood and stone, but the kind made of memory, music, and meaning. In his most recent interview, when asked directly if he's afraid of what comes next, Willie smiled that familiar grin and said, "No, I'm not scared. I've had one hell of a ride. I just want the last verse to be mine." Those words say everything. For decades, Willie sang of heartbreak, rebellion, and redemption. Now he sings of gratitude. He's ready to fade out on his own terms, not in silence, but in peace. To fans who beg him not to stop, Willie's message is simple. Don't be sad when I'm gone. Play the songs. Sing along. That's how I'll stick around. It's not about the end. It's about the echo of his laughter backstage, of his guitar under moonlight, of a man who gave everything he had to his craft and left the world better for it. As the sun sets behind him, the camera pans out, the same porch, the same man, the same music softly playing in the wind. Willie Nelson doesn't say goodbye with tears or regret. He says it the only way he knows how, with a smile, a strum, and a whisper. Thanks for listening. I'll see you down the road.